Good morning, everyone. My name is Campbell Pegg, and I'm the Program Manager of the Moon to Mars initiative from the Australian Space Agency. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. The Adelaidean team meets currently on the Kaurna land, and we pay our respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. I extend that respect to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people here today. So next slide. We would like to welcome today's information session on the Demonstrator Program mission grants, which is due to open next month. Today, I'm also joined by Enrico Palermo, the head of the Australian Space Agency, Dr. Elise Ellender, and Dr. Melody Anvia from the agency's Moon to Mars team. And also on the panel today, we have Peter Hunter and Dr. Jelena Merik-Nesik from Oz Industry. So just to note, this session today will be recorded and distributed to various digital agency platforms. After this session, we'll also have a Q&A. So you'll see on the next slide that I'd recommend you go to slido.com. That is slido.com, and enter the event code Demonstrator Mission. That's Demonstrator Mission, capital D, capital M, all one word. And then you can put your questions down there and we'll answer them at the end of the presentation. Today's webinar will run for approximately 45 minutes. And this is a really good opportunity for anyone to have any questions on the Demonstrator Mission grants, so you can bid appropriately. So now I'd like to welcome the head of the Australian Space Agency, Enrico Palermo, to the virtual stage.
Thanks a lot, Campbell, and good morning, good afternoon to everyone around the nation. I would also like to extend and acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I meet today. I'm in Canberra, the lands of the Ngunnawal people, and pay my respect to their elders, past and present, and certainly extend that acknowledgement to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders that are joining us for this great webinar today. So it's terrific to be here. Thank you so much for joining. We were so excited to see the number of registrants for this really important webinar. Moon to Mars is our flagship initiative. It's where the Australian government is investing $150 million in the Australian space industry in order to allow us to support Australia's ambitions to be alongside NASA as it explores Moon and onto Mars into the future. The Moon to Mars program in 2021 really went from strength to strength, and I commend Campbell for his leadership and the team that's been moving the Moon to Mars initiative along. We released guidelines for obviously the Demonstrator Program, the Mission Program, which we're talking about today. We awarded 20 consortia around the nation as part of the Demonstrator feasibility studies, and there's some really innovative projects that were proposed and awarded through that. We continue to get Australian companies into international supply chains through the Moon to Mars supply chain program, and we just a few weeks ago announced our fourth intake and the fifth intake awardees is not too far away. And then, of course, as one of our biggest moments of 2021, we announced we are going to the moon after the Australian Space Agency signed a Space Act agreement with NASA for an Aussie design and built rover to be sent to the moon with a really neat mission, which is to collect regolith, lunar soil, take it to a plant to see if we can extract oxygen from it. And for many of the registrants will be aware, bids for the Trailblazer program open at the moment. But today we're focused on Demonstrator, and Demonstrator, actually, out of all of the agency programs, is one of the most exciting for me, because this is about getting Australian hardware into space so we really can scale your technology from a startup mode to a scale-up mode. And so I encourage you to really look at this program, to submit great applications, ask great questions on this webinar today, because in my mind, Demonstrator is going to do some amazing things for the nations and really contribute to our objective to triple the size of the sector, and really look at how we can spin in Australian ingenuity, Australian talent, our experience from other sectors, in order to have a thriving sector which supports the safety, security and prosperity of all Australians. So all the best to the team for the webinar. Thanks for letting me say hello, and we look forward to seeing your applications when the round opens. Thanks, Campbell.
Thank you very much, Enrico, for those kind words. Before we move into the demonstrator program, I'd like to actually go over the Moon to Mars initiative itself and talk a little bit about its objectives and also the Moon to Mars initiative. So the key objectives of the Moon to Mars initiative is to support Australia's ambitions to join NASA's endeavour and go on to Mars, accelerate growth in revenue and jobs and in the Australian space sector, build Australian capability and capacity, lift Australians' involvement in national and international supply chains, demonstrate Australian capabilities to the world, and inspire the nation. Now, what we've done with the program is actually broken down into three programs: the supply chain program, the demonstrator program, and the trailblazer program. So I'll go through the first one, and I'll go through this quite quickly because it's just a general overview. But the supply chain program it's all about getting Australian companies into international and domestic supply chains. And we have the grants component and the facilitation component, which is about trying to raise capability of the Australian space industry, and also about getting the buyers to start providing services and helping Australian companies into international and domestic supply chains. Opportunities for today is the capability grants are open now and you can apply, and the next round will actually close on the 3rd of March 2022, so very soon. I would also, the demonstrator program, this is what the details of today will be about, but fundamentally this is about getting people and their products and their services into space and getting that space heritage. And then the very last one is the Trailblazer program, which Enrico talked about. And this is a major mission going to the moon. So this is an Australian Foundation Services rover that we will send in a joint mission with NASA by 2026 or 2027. So this is going to be an absolutely amazing inspirational piece for Australia, and it is open now to apply, and the applications will close at the end of this month. So we're looking forward to people's bids here as well. So now I'll pass it on to Dr. Elise Eleanor and Dr. Melody Anvia. And so I'll pass it over to Elise now. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Elise Allender and I am the Trailblazer Program Lead for the Moon to Mars team. And I'm going to be just showing you the schedule of the rest of the webinar today. So I'm going to take you through the objectives, the program structure and timeline, a mission grant summary, and then we'll talk about eligibility and who can apply. And I'll give you some examples of some eligible activities for this grant program. And then I'm going to hand over to my colleague Melody, who'll take you through the submission process, the assessment process, and discuss the time frame for the program. Melody's also going to tell you where you can find more information after this webinar, and then we'll lead into the Q&A session. So these are the objectives of the demonstrator program. You may have seen them if you've already taken a look through the guidelines available on the business.gov.au website. So I'm not going to go through them word for word here today because you'll be very familiar with them as you work through submitting your applications. But essentially, as Enrico mentioned, through Demonstrator, we would like to increase Australia's space heritage, and we'd like to do this by increasing the number of Australian businesses and research institutions who are able to develop and implement space projects. So we'd like to have more Australian tech in space. And through this, it will increase investment into the Australian industry, and it will also increase our potential to support international missions and Moon to Mars activities. So here's an overview of the demonstrator program itself, and it's divided into two main elements. So these two elements span the phases of a typical mission development lifecycle, and you can see here some of the activities involved across pre-phase A through to phase F. So the demonstrator feasibility grants, as Enrico mentioned, have already been awarded. So we had $3.7 million awarded to 20 grantees who received about $200,000 for their projects. And the mission grants, which we're talking about today, we have $41.5 million to advance projects through the activities that you see from phase C through to phase F. And an individual project for the mission grant can be awarded up to $10 million. So applications for this opportunity open on the 14th of March of this year, and they close on the 1st of July. And as I said, the maximum grant for each project is $10 million. We are expecting a typical application for this round to be about $4 million for a project, but there is a minimum grant amount here also of $750,000. Now, the grant amount, a mission grant, will be able to fund up to 75% of your eligible project expenditure. So the minimum project cost for this opportunity is $1 million. And so, as an example, the grant you would be awarded for a $1 million project would be $750,000. And then we would require you to make a 25% in-cash contribution. So you can fund this contribution from a number of sources, through private funding, state or territory funding, or local government funding. The only thing you can't fund it from is another Commonwealth government grant, as you can't hold two Commonwealth grants at the same time. So in terms of eligibility, when you submit your application, it is first assessed by our colleagues at AusIndustry for its eligibility, and then it is passed on for assessment by a selection committee. So in order to be eligible, we are looking for applications where you provide evidence that you or your project partners can have or support an asset in space by the 31st of March 2025. And this evidence might include things like a letter from your CEO, or you can show this in your project proposal through your project management scheduling, or through your planning. We also require that you submit a proposal in accordance with the proposal template, and this template will be on the business.gov.au website once this mission grant opportunity opens. So from the 14th of March, on the website, you'll see a number of key documents there that you'll need to submit your proposal, and this template will be one of them. We also require that you've established a quality assurance panel, and they will need to provide an assessment report that covers your preliminary design review outcomes. You must also agree to use a recognised space industry standard, and which standard you choose is up to you. You might choose a NASA standard or ESA standard, but it must be a recognised industry standard. In terms of who can apply, you must be an entity incorporated in Australia, a trading corporation, or a publicly funded research organisation. So if you are a trading corporation, you are able to submit an application as a sole applicant, but we do encourage teaming through your application. If you are a research organisation, you must submit a joint application with an Australian trading corporation. So these are some examples of eligible and ineligible activities. So on the left, you'll see the typical activities that you might expect to see in phase C through phase F of that mission development lifecycle. And these are things like final designs, fabrication, assembly, qualification, launch, regulatory activities, risk assessments, and so on. As I mentioned, you do need to be at the PDR stage in order to be eligible for a mission grant. But if you have identified issues in that PDR, you can undertake remediation activities to address those, and these are considered eligible activities under this grant. In terms of ineligible activities, essentially anything pre-phase A or phase A, and anything that is not a mission. So we're looking to increase the number of assets Australia has in space by 2025. So it can't be in the form of a research project, documenting or collating existing research or business as usual activities. You must be applying with a mission. So with that, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Melody to talk you through the submission process.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks very much, Elise. My name is Melody Anvia, and I'm actually taking over the Demonstrator Program lead role from Elise. With respect to the Demonstrator Grants mission grants submission process, we do actually recommend and actually strongly emphasize to our applicants that they read and understand the Demonstrator Mission Grant Guidelines, and also the sample grant agreement, which will be available shortly on business.gov.au and on Grant Connect. In order to apply for a missions grant, you must complete the online application form and address all of the eligibility and assessment criteria within that. In addition, you will be required to actually submit a number of supporting documents with your application, including a completed proposal using the proposal template that we will provide. In the next slide, you can see there's a number of other supporting documents which you will also need to supply. In section 7.1 of the guidelines, all of these are listed and they're reproduced on the slide here as well. I will just draw your attention to the fact that you will need to produce a very detailed project plan and project budget, both of which we will provide templates for. And also you will need to provide some evidence of funding, of your funding strategy, as well as evidence of support. In the next slide, you will see that the assessment criteria, there are basically 4 main assessment criteria which we will use to assess each of the applications. So the eligibility of the applications will be assessed by Oz Industry, and then afterwards the application will go to an assessment panel where they will look at the 4 aspects that are on the slide. So the first one is basically we will look at how does your project, the space project that you propose, how does this align with the objectives of the Demonstrator Mission Program? And what we also want to see here is how well the Demonstrator Mission, the program that you are proposing actually aligns with the objectives of your own organization. We're also looking for information on the quality of the technical solution that you're proposing, as well as the quality assurance of this solution, and for details on the capacity, capability, and resources that you have in order to be able to actually progress your project through the mission development lifecycle and onto delivery. But in addition to delivering the project, what we also want to know from the applicants is what are the positive aspects, or what are the ongoing positive aspects and benefits from delivering your project. So what will be the gain not only to your own organization, but what is the gain that we will find or see in the Australian industry as a whole. So it is critical that any project that is submitted in this application must be able to be delivered within the timeframe of the grant, and that is by March 2025. In the next slide, you'll find the expected timings for the mission grant projects applications. So as you've seen earlier in the presentation, mission grant applications will close on the 1st of July 2022, and the subsequent assessment process will take about 12 weeks, after which we will notify the applicants of the outcomes of the review. The end of date grant commitment, as I've mentioned earlier, is March 2025. If you would like any further information, you can see on the next slide that you can contact business.gov.au or contact 13 28 46 if you would like any further information, or if you would also like to ask any further questions after this webinar has been completed. And we do ask you kindly, please do not contact the agency directly, as our colleagues at business.gov will actually collect the questions and put these on a fact sheet which others can then access online afterwards as well. So with that, that concludes the presentations aspect of this webinar. And we'll now go into the online questions, or the Q&A session. If you have not done so already, please feel free to go to slido.com on your phone or computer and enter the event code Demonstrator Mission. So capital D, capital M, and all in one word. You can ask a question, or if you see a question's already been asked, feel free to like the question that you would like to see answered. And a reminder that this presentation is actually being recorded, so it will be available afterwards on business.gov.au. And another reminder that the supply chain capability grants, for those who wish to apply, intake 6 applications will close on the 3rd of March 2022. So with that, we'll start the Q&A session. And first question for the panelists is, if we haven't reached the phase B yet at the moment, but plan to fund it ourselves, can we still apply to the Demonstrator Mission grant now? So Campbell, is that one that you'd like to answer?
Yes, so if you look at the eligibility criteria, you must submit a proposal with a PDR conducted and reviewed by your assessment, by your quality assurance panel. So the key aspect here is that ineligible activities will be phase A and pre-phase A. We want you at the PDR level when you apply. So basically get to a PDR in the next, by mid this month. And then when you submit it, you should be at this level. So what we do allow is that we understand that a PDR is a review. We understand that you might come up with some issues in that. If you had to then do some changes to your design that would be technically in a phase B level, this would be fine. But we expect you to go through the PDR milestone first.
Okay, thanks very much. So with the 25% contribution, do we need to provide the proof of funds, or this investment can come in after the grant is awarded or conditionally approved?
Yeah, well, I can take that one. G'day guys, it's Pete Hunter. I'm the program manager for the Moon to Mars programs, and obviously with Mission. The advantage is obviously to provide evidence to actually support that you have your cash contribution. We prefer not to obviously have that contribution flowing through like a cash flow or a revenue. So there are other methods and other streams that you can actually have to actually provide that cash flow. So, as part of the requirements and part of the attachments that you will put through, you can actually have different financial statements that can be made available to the government. All the information that we do receive through all of the application process is considered commercial in confidence, so we won't be providing any of those details out to anyone else.
Thanks a lot, Pete. Our next question is, does the feasibility mission have to have any link to the Trailblazer mission? So I'm not sure, Pete or Campbell.
I can answer this one. So we can only assess you on the assessment criteria. And one of the assessment criteria is the ability to support Moon to Mars activities. And we have narrowed this down to be focusing quite heavily more on the exploration. Does it have to directly link into Trailblazer? No, that is clear. So you don't have to go into Trailblazer mission. Of course, your business case does summarize quite well when you do put it into Trailblazer, but as long as you're linking into the ability to support Moon to Mars, which means the ability to actually do exploration missions around the visions that we've stated already, this would be enough. So we understand that there are different things that are in the future, and we're here to develop and get that space heritage. So to expect everyone to go to the moon the first time around would be a very difficult thing to do, and to do that by 2025 is, I would say, it would be very, very difficult. So as long as you are having the ability to support Moon to Mars objectives, which is those exploration visions, this would be enough for a mission to go forward. But as I said before, you'll be assessed only on the assessment criteria. We don't have any other assessment criteria. It's whatever stated in the guidelines. So whatever that is, this is what we assess you to.
Thanks, Campbell. We've had multiple requests for a copy of the slide deck. I imagine that will be possible, and we'll look into uploading that onto business.gov.au as well. The next question for our panel is, can the Australian Space Agency further describe the QA panel needs?
Yes, I can take that. So in a typical space mission, so a lot of the missions we have today, or not we have today, but a typical mission that will be done, say, in other countries, sometimes it will be done as a procurement, and a lot of that procurement, there's a lot of services that come from the procurer from a quality check, because when you're buying a purchase, you would actually normally check to see what sort of quality you're at the different phases. We realize that when it comes to a grant, that is not necessarily our role, is to come in and check to see if you're doing it in the right manner. So in essence, this function of where you actually have to have quality assurance, this is a function that you need to set up, that you need to bring it into your design about how are you actually going to quality review your mission. So how you set this up is completely your decision, but of course, a better quality assurance panel, so a quality assurance panel in terms of individuals who have significant levels of experience on areas that you don't have inside your actual inside your capability would be ideal. So just from a personal side, what I would typically do is write down the skill sets that we would need from a quality assurance panel, and then I would try and find individuals out there that have those skills. But as I said, it's your call what you do here. They don't have to be independent, so they don't have to be a completely independent panel, but to have some sort of, it shouldn't be the same people who are working on it and then come over and quality assurance. There should be some sort of degree of separation from the workers and the people processing them. But the main aspect here is that it's your job to monitor the quality. From the agency's point of view, our job is just to ensure that you're doing the process correctly.
Thanks very much, Campbell. Our next couple of questions actually relate to partners for these missions. The first one is, can we have international industrial partners in addition to the Australian one? And then we have a specific question regarding, can we have a US partner for this mission, eventually with US government funding? So, Campbell, maybe.
Yeah, sure. I'm sure Pete will answer some of this as well. But so the rules about partnerships are in the guidelines. So whatever's in the guidelines are the direct rules that should be followed. There's no limitation on having international partners. So you can have international partners. That is completely fine. But we do have, if you've noticed in the appendices, we do have areas on Australian industry content. And this is something that we haven't put a hard and fast rule about what exactly you need to have. So what is the level that you need to have in Australia and what you need to have outside. But the clear intention for us is to build Australian capability. So what we'd not want to see is we'd have one person in Australia and 55 people overseas as a partner. This wouldn't be something that would be ideal. And I with the assessment group, I can't make a decision for them, but this would be, for me, considered lower on the assessment panel side of things. So there is an indication if you look at the appendices, there shows that we want to have two key attributes when it comes to industry content, Australian industry content. One of them is related to how much expenditure is actually in Australia itself. And to give you guys an earmark as an idea around about what we're thinking, in the order of 80%. But ideally, I would think of how do you get everything in Australia? And then from a risk perspective, okay, we understand developing absolutely everything here. When it's less risky to develop some things overseas, we understand things need to be across. So I would take this approach. How can we develop everything in Australia? And then from a risk point of view, you can layer it down a bit further. The other entity we're always considering here is what skills you're keeping in. So we clearly want to have the ability to build and develop and design spacecraft here, which means we need system engineers, we do need software and electrical engineers coming through. We also need a range of key capabilities in this country. And we want these capabilities here, but of course it's your project and where you place the individuals in which countries is all, and then we'll assess you from the assessment committee directly. So I hope that answers the question, but in essence you can have it, but we do have Australian industry content earmarking what we'd like to see from Australian industry content.
Yeah, that's good, Campbell. And just to add to that as well, I guess when you actually go and put through your application, there will be a level of support that will also assist with your project partner, and being able to provide as much detail as you can with the project partner as well. So, how the project partner is going to be working with the lead the organisation, of your entity, and how your project partners are going to successfully complete the project itself.
Thanks very much, Pete. Our next question relates to the 25% co-contribution. The question is, can the 25% contribution include salary costs of existing staff at industry or university partners that are allocated to a mission?
So to be clear, like, the cash contribution is specifically cash contribution. In kind does not cover, obviously, your wages, your salaries, contractors, or anything like that. Whilst that is eligible expenditure within the project itself, it does need to be a physical cash contribution.
Okay.
So just to make sure, Pete, just to make sure it's 100% clear, paying a salary of some individual is considered cash. That's just to confirm that, because I think that's pretty much the main question most people ask us is, can a salary be considered as cash?
Thanks, Campbell. Can we allocate part of the grant funding for launch services to demonstrate the viability of our technology in space?
Yes, eligible activity includes launch services as well. And you've noticed on the Australian industry content, we've also said that 80% excluding launch services. So we understand that there's going to be some decent cost associated with launch. There are probably 20 items here. They don't have to be launched in Australia. So we understand that it's a tough ask to have everything put here. So, but in essence, yes, you can fund the launch services through this. But please read the guidelines 100%, because there are some limitations when it comes to BAU items like this. So please just read them full details. And if you have any further sort of very specific questions on this, please just email, or ring up contact centre at business.gov.au.
Thanks very much. We have a question regarding the PDR. You've mentioned it. Well, the question says you've mentioned PDR level that the project needs to be at prior to application. Could you please elaborate on that or provide a reference to where it is defined?
So the part here is, what is a PDR level, I think, is the key question you're asking. As you've noted in your project, as a part of the eligibility criteria, you have to earmark a specific standard that you want to work around. Now, this part, when it comes to a specific standard, we're not saying you have to adhere 100% to this standard. We just want to make sure that we're talking about the same thing, and we're using the same guidelines amongst each other. So when we say this should be at a PDR level when you come through, to what that level is, we would be referring to the standard that you've chosen. But of course, if you look at the standards, they have like 1,000 documents you need to deliver for PDR. It wouldn't make sense to deliver all of those documents. You'd go through it and say, this would make sense for the mission that we have. And most standards are expected to be tailored for your needs. So what I would ask the individual when it comes to what PDR level is, I'd go in and check the standard that you want to use and say, okay, this is what you typically deliver for a PDR, and this is what we're going to deliver. And then it has to be assessed by your quality assurance panel. That assessment has to be as well.
Thanks very much. The next question, Pete, you might like to answer this one. It's about demo grants and who should lead. So in the situation where there's a university with industrial partners, who should lead the demo grants?
So the lead applicant, so obviously the public funded research organisations, they do need to have obviously a project partner who needs to fit the eligibility guidelines as well. So the university can actually be the lead. The research organisation can be the lead. That's no problem at all. They just need to have that project partner being involved with them as well.
Thanks very much. The next question relates to multiple missions. If multiple missions can be combined into a single demonstrator, Will that allow it to bypass the expectation of the typical $4 million size due to a larger scope? Not sure who wants to take this one.
I can answer this. So we were just earmarking approximately what we would expect the size of a mission would be. The absolute maximum you can ask for is 10 million. So between the lowest value, which is 750,000, 10 million, you can ask for any value between those two values. But of course, if you're going to 10 million, we would expect to see some very clear benefits of doing this. So you would need to explain why would this be better than funding 2 $4 million plus? Because we get two from a government point of view, we get 2 sets of capabilities, 2 sets of groups who build up that heritage. When you're building, when it goes to 10 million, then why is it more beneficial for taking 10 million? So we want to see a major benefit to our country from that side. And that can be in the form of significant co-funding levels that comes via it, or it can be on a significantly more impressive mission. It's all combined. It's a little bit your call, what you say, but you just need to articulate why this is going to be such an amazing thing to have this all together.
The next question says, are subsidiary companies that were incorporated internationally but have an ABN or ARBN and a presence in Australia eligible? Pete?
That one. Yeah, so as long as they actually meet the guidelines, so that they have to have an Australian business number, be obviously registered for goods and services, and be that incorporated Australian trading corporation. So if they meet all of that eligibility, they're more than welcome to apply.
Thanks very much. The next question is, I think it regards supporting documentation. Basically, the question says, would the letter of support maybe be needed from NASA or ESA for the project, I think is meant there.
So letters of support, yeah. So we require letters of support from the lead applicant, from their project partners as well. I'm not quite sure. Campbell could probably answer this question because I'm not sure if NASA would actually be involved as a project partner. But I don't think that the assessment committee will actually use that as information with their assessment itself.
Yeah. So we have stated in the FAQs that we won't take into account letters of support from NASA because it's, in essence, most governments don't want to influence other government spending procedures. So obviously it depends a little bit on the country, but we've been asked specifically to remove the NASA letter from here. That doesn't mean that having a relationship or a project with NASA is not beneficial. It just shouldn't, on their side, influence specifically. What you provide is your call. Just read the FAQs and also the guidelines to ensure that it's in line. But they're not needed, so you don't. It doesn't have to be produced.
All right. Thanks very much. Our next question asks, could the ASA put in space license fees as a contribution rather than have precious grant money from the department be sent back to the department? Pete or Campbell?
Just repeat that question again.
Could the ASA put in space license fees as a contribution rather than have precious grant money from the department be sent back to the department?
We have, over $40 million worth of grant funding at this particular time. I don't think the ASA will actually be putting any licenses in. The funding is actually going to a great cause for obviously all of these demonstrator missions, Trailblazer, our supply chain as well. The money's there. It's been $150 million for the Moon to Mars initiative itself. The money's to be used for grant funding, to get to the moon and then beyond from there as well. I recommend that when people actually apply for the grant funding itself, apply for it accordingly to what your project is.
Yeah, just to to answer it directly here, so you're talking about funding grant licenses, the money directly from, to put that as a part of this. Some of the individuals won't actually launch things. So the partner might launch as a separate entity from the grant agreement. So if you notice that it's the ability to support all your project the ability to support an asset in space. Some people will actually put in an application that won't be putting something directly in space. They actually will be connecting with something that may be already in space and items like this. So from sort of a funding point of view, we haven't sort of started piecewising all of the different costs and starting to allocate them from there. We do appreciate the feedback and areas that how we can always improve in grants. But you probably will notice that it is actually ineligible to pay to give grant money back to ourselves. So from a pure, we can't give you grant money that you're just going to hand back to the agency for regulatory. They can't come actually eligible. They're not eligible to do so.
Thanks very much, Campbell. We might just do another couple of questions and then we'll wrap up the Q&A session. Our next question is, please advise for foreign organisations looking to enable or collaborate with Australian consortia for this grant. I'm not sure.
Campbell. International, overseas, foreign partners can definitely be involved with the process. Again, lead applicant just needs to match all of the eligibility criteria. There's no problem actually having foreign entities being involved. As Campbell said a little bit previously, wanting to keep about obviously 80% of the funding here within Australia, but foreign entities are fine.
So why we didn't want to ban foreign entities, and actually it's because it's an international industry. We do need foreign entities to be around, and there's a lot of benefits about all that partnerships. And at the same time, one of the key objectives is getting into supply chains of foreign entities, of foreign space markets or international space supply chains. So there are some significant benefits, but for us, we need to explain what the benefits to Australia is. What we would not want to see is all the money just going overseas and building up capability overseas. That's not something that we want to see from a grant point of view. What we could see is great partnerships is where international industry is supporting Australians here in the forms of system engineering, the forms of sort of technical areas, and also leveraging certain skill sets that they have overseas to then really bring into Australia and how it's going to help us. You probably notice in the assessment criteria, you have to articulate what that benefit is to Australia and why. So if the point of the aim is to sort of bring money outside Australia, then you've really got to articulate why that is going to be so beneficial for Australia. And if it is not, then the assessment committee will assess you accordingly. So just consider this quite heavily. We have been quite forward-leaning on the point of we really want the skill set and we really want money to stay in Australia, but we understand that we want to build up those international relationships. We also want to build up those international supply chains. And so we think the best people to figure out how that relationship will actually be you guys. So sit down with the partners and discuss how that should be, but please consider what we've put down there as a key entity that we really do want to build this capability in Australia.
Thanks very much. And our final question for today is, can you please elaborate on how project management approaches are assessed to be space industry standard or not? And will you be referred to a specific reference?
So I'll take this one. So once again, assessment committee can only assess you on the assessment criteria that have been put forward. So once you're being assessed, these are the key elements that they must do it on. So we have asked you to earmark a specific standard that you want to be sort of assessed to, but the primary reason for this is because it is very difficult to assess a grantee when we actually have no standards to match to. In the terms of what documents do you need to provide for a PDR, what sort of quality or standards should those documents be at? So what we're trying to do is earmark the bar, the high bar that you are expecting to be assessed at, and then we'll assess you to the assessment criteria. criteria. Specifically on project management approaches and assessment for this specific part, I can't really directly comment on. But the key aspect here is that if you come in and say, look, you know what, the ECSS is the key one that I want to look at, this is the one that I've been referring to, this gives us a common language that we can discuss around. So instead of us saying, well, actually the NASA standards say this and the ESA standards say that, and maybe the Japanese standards say this, you earmark a specific one, and then we can go down to the ECSS and say, hey, why haven't you produced these 5 documents? And then you can articulate it, well, I haven't because of these reasons. That's completely fine. It's your program, what you want to do, but at least we're talking around a common language. At least we're talking around the same thing. It gets very difficult when the goalposts are constantly moving around. What are the names of the milestones that we should be articulating? What are the different phases? Because they change between different standards and different standard sets. So that was the primary reason why we've done it. On project management, I can't specifically comment, but on the general aspect of how the grant will be managed, this helps significantly on questioning why you're doing certain things and allowing you to justify to us, but primarily to your quality assurance panel, why you're doing these sets of things.
Before I let you off the hook, we've got one more question, which is actually extremely popular, so we're going to have to answer this one as well. A lot of people have asked, would missions which incorporate feasibility study projects be looked upon more favorably? So Campbell, if you want to do that.
So once again, we'll assess you to the assessment criteria and the assessment criteria alone. So as you probably noticed, the bar is a lot higher for the demonstrator mission grants. You have to get to a certain level to ensure that you can pass and be eligible to go into it, and that was that PDR side. If you've got and done your own PDR and you've done your own work and you've done it all behind here, which I know some individuals do have, some groups do have a significant capability to do so, then you'll be assessed all in the same manner, but it's all to that assessment criteria. There's no assessment criteria there that says anything about have you been funded from the feasibility studies. So we'll take everyone on the equal footing and assess you to the assessment criteria itself. But the point of the feasibility grants was to give people a leg up to start that process. So you've actually had the time and the opportunity, and then we can also earmark what we're looking for the bigger sets of money. So to give people that opportunity. So
excellent.
Short answer is no, you will not be looked more favorably. As long as you meet the eligibility criteria, you'll be assessed all according to the assessment criteria.
Thanks, Campbell. Just to add to that as well, with Mission, we didn't have it set down in the guidelines that you had to be successful in feasibility to then apply for Mission. Trailblazer, that's slightly different. You need to be successful in stage 1 to then go to stage 2. But as Campbell said, all applications will be assessed on the merit and the information that's actually been provided.
And also,
thanks very much. Oops, sorry
to jump in here. I know that we're going to finish up now, but just to an aspect, because I know people are trying to figure out exactly what they need to put in to bid. In the Trailblazer program, we've obviously put a few templates down on the proposal templates and also the budget templates there. We're obviously not going to carbon copy these directly because they're specific for Trailblazer, but as if you wanted a good indication of what you'd see, these are a good place to start. And of course, what is put up on the demonstrator guideline, on the business.gov.au for Demonstrator Mission, they will be the templates that we're asking for. But if you wanted to get a bit of a head start, just go to the Trailblazer program. You'll see a range of documents added there that you can look into as an idea about what you'd expect.
All right, thanks very much. That concludes the Q&A session for the webinar. So I'll just hand over to Campbell now.
Thank you very much, Melody. And I'd like to thank everyone today for coming. There's been some fantastic questions. It's always great to be talking to you and providing these webinars and giving this information over. Because we know sometimes it's a very difficult thing, and you guys put a lot of effort into these grants, and we appreciate all the effort you guys have been doing to getting there. And we of course are looking forward to reading what you guys submit, specifically we've got a lot going on, the capability grants, we've got the demonstrator grants, which are not overlapping directly with the Trailblazer program, but we also have Trailblazer. So I know that you guys are all very busy. and taking your time out today is greatly appreciated. So thank you very much for growing the Australian space industry. For further information, please go to business.gov.au or contact 13 28 26, business.gov.au or 13 28 26 for all your unanswered questions. Please don't come directly to us. I know some of you guys have personal contacts inside the agency or through the inquiries hotline. We will just give you the same response. Please contact business.gov.au or 13 28 46. The reason why this is because we want this done in a fair and equitable manner, and we do see the questions that come through business.gov. So please go through there. They will come to us. A recording of this presentation will also be available on the agency YouTube, including the slide deck and any social media pages. So if you've missed this, just tell people to go to the link and they'll be able to watch all of this so everyone can see all the information on this. So once again, thank you very much for your time today.